Welcome, everybody. My name is Nimir Laveau, and I am the director of the Seattle Psychics Association. I am joined tonight by Roman Delgado, who is a spa certified member of the Seattle Psychics, as well as a shamanic practitioner and a whole host of amazing talents and skills. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into what is shamanic healing. And at any time, you're welcome to participate by commenting in the chat your question or your comment, and we will feature it and have it add to the conversation that we're going to have. We are going to enjoy the next hour together having this great conversation. And if we run over and still have more to cover, maybe we will have a part two. So stay tuned. So please welcome Ramon Delgado. Welcome, Ramon. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Roman Delgado. I am a shamanic practitioner. I am a shamanic healer. I am a conjurman. I have a background in brujeria, curanderismo, core shamanism, and many forms of spiritual healing, in particularly energy modalities surrounding Reiki. I went through massage therapy school. So when it comes to the healing path, I am a jack of all trades.
Yeah, that's very accurate. It's sometimes hard to introduce you because it would take most of the hour to be like, and here are all of his experiences and skills and talents.
Yeah, if you ever come to see me at the store where I do my work, I have little menus where you can pick my services out of because it just takes too long to explain what I do. So I just hand people a menu.
Well, and lately, I guess, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you have been, I mean, you've been a shamanic practitioner for most of your practice, but you have done some serious deep dives even further into your training, I would say probably in the last 6 months or so. Is that accurate? Yeah.
This last year, I've been doing a lot more training on core shamanism with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. It began actually with COVID. The Foundation for Shamanic Studies is starting to offer online classes to delve deeper into the work through Skype. And I took some of those classes that led me to qualify for a 2-week intensive retreat on core shamanism that I just got back from a couple of days ago.
And how was that?
Oh, it was absolutely amazing. It was healing, it was empowering, it was educating. It was everything it needed to be and more.
I definitely want to talk more about that in a little bit. But for those that maybe have never heard about shamanism or shamanic healing, would you mind giving kind of an overview for somebody who, like, let's say they've never heard of it before, of what it is
Well,
and some of the history?
shamanism is the original form of spirituality of all of mankind. It is what was religion before religion. It was spirituality before spirituality, magic before magic, even witchcraft before witchcraft, or paganism before paganism. Before any type of religious ceremonial practice, there was shamanism. And in order to understand shamanism, we first must understand the shaman. The
Mm.
shaman is the original walker between worlds, the bridge between the world of the divine and the world of mankind. Shamans all over the world go into an ecstatic trance and enter what in core shamanism we call non-ordinary reality, what normal people will call the spirit world, which is not quite the same, but it's the closest metaphor that I can give you that it will make you understand. And we retrieve wisdom, healing, power, or knowledge on behalf of mankind. We go up into the upper world, down into the lower world, and then we bring back what we find for you. The energy of shamanism revolves around that core principle, which is the shamanic journey into the cosmology that is the shamanic worldview.
And so it is still very much a part of our world today. It is as much as it is an ancient practice, it is a modern practice. And it's extremely varied, correct? Like you can find it in all cultures and all histories, as far as I understand it. So, there's a lot of different flavors. And please correct me if I'm wrong on any of
Well,
this.
that brings me to something I wanted to talk about, and I want to get it out of the way first, okay? Because we talk about cultures here. I get a lot of people asking me, what gives you the right to practice shamanism? You're not Native American. And I'm like, no. Shamanism on its own is not a closed practice. Every single culture around the entire globe at one point or another in their history has had shamanism at the core of their history. Okay? It is medicine work, the traditional rituals of specific cultures that are close practices. The despacho ceremonies of the Quechua shamans, those are close practices. The Temazcal ceremonies of the Maya, the sun dance of the Native Americans of the United States. You know, those are close practices that you have to be invited to. At one point or another, it doesn't matter if you're Native American, Mexican, South American, Indian, or even European. Your ancestors held some type of shamanic practice, and they are varied in many ways in flavors due to their cultural context. Those practices mix with medicine work, with rituals that are unique to those specific cultures. But what is cross-cultural is the shamanic journey, which takes place either through ethnogens, particularly psychedelic style of plants that the shaman has a spiritual relationship with. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. Or repetitive music or dance. You know, the one-sided hoop Native American drum is very popular in the United States to enter shamanic trance by steady repetitive beat of 220 beats per minute. That puts you in a trance. A rattle does the same thing. I have seen native people from many different cultures around the world dance in order to get into that. I've seen people sing, do shamanic singing, that the melody and the harmony and the beat of the song induces a trance. There's even the didgeridoo. Most people don't know this because it's seen as this hippie thing that is done since the 90s, people playing the didgeridoo. But the didgeridoo was originally a way to induce shamanic trance.
What is the didgeridoo? Is that an instrument or
Yes, it's an instrument. It's basically a large piece of wood, like a big tree branch that is about this thick
right?
and long enough to go from your lips to the floor, and you blow on it and
Ah.
it makes a noise that is
Oh,
very,
yes, it's sort of that deep sort of
yes,
almost guttural, like, and it
yes.
gets right into your, like, fibers. Yes, okay. Well, and, just bridging off of that, a lot of since shamanism has survived time and place, is there things that we all do, whether we're shamanic practitioners, trained, etc., in our daily life that reflects sort of shamanic practices? Like, is there something, when people go out on a walk, typical things, like how does somebody who's not a practitioner bring it into their daily practice?
Well, one interesting thing that it could be done is gardening. Your connection to plants. Do you talk to your plants? Do you acknowledge that they are alive? That they are people too? Do you sing to them? You know, do you have conversations with them to help them grow? That is an
Mm.
instinctively shamanic thing to do. Shamans who work with plant medicine don't just go around and take ayahuasca or peyote or mushrooms and say, "I'm a shaman." You know, taking peyote or mushrooms once a week on your grandfather's basement doesn't make you a shaman. That makes you a drug addict.
Right.
You know,
That is very good point. Yeah.
so having a relationship with specific plant medicine and making sure that you connect with that plant on a spiritual level is an instinctively shamanic practice. And in particularly communities that are very magical in their cultures, that is very common. Even people who are not shamans, who are from a very magical worldview, will talk to their plants like they're beings, like they're alive.
Mm. Well, and and that's a great answer to that, because I think that people often forget how tied into the spirits of nature we are around us in plants and animals and whatnot. And we keep talking about, plant usage for shamanism, etc. And a lot of people will go on like retreats and they will be supervised by shamans and they will be taken through their own shamanic journey. A lot of what we're talking about here is that the shaman goes and does a journey for you. What do can you just add some buy-in on people being led through their shamanic journey? Is that
Well, that applies more when you're using plant medicine, when you're using ethnogens, because when you're using an ethnogen to enter a shamanic state of consciousness, you are surrendering 100% of your control.
hmm,
You are no longer in charge of your life or your own well-being or even your safety. The plant spirit is in charge of everything. And
hmm,
there are some plant spirits who can be very capricious, very trickster type vibe, and they can be very dark, that can heal as well as they can do harm. Sorcery and shamanism are two sides of the same coin. The only difference between the two is the intent of the practitioner and the
hmm,
spirits they work with.
hmm,
Some plant spirits and spirits like crystals, for example, have that ability that with just the same amount of ease that they can make your life better, they can tear it to shreds.
hmm.
And
Yeah,
because
one of
of
my
that,
favorite quotes is the dose makes the poison. Something that can kill you can also heal you and vice versa.
in core shamanism, we call those types of spirits amoral spirits because they don't have a polarization between good or evil, creative or destructive. They simply are, and they can have their own agenda. The reason why the shaman guides you through a journey with plant medicine, the most famous of it and the most popular for the last 30 to 40 years being the ayahuasca ceremony, it's because they have an actual relationship with the ayahuasca vine. They have been journeying with it their entire lives, and they have been training on their experienced shamans in order to do so also for decades, if not lifetimes.
Mm.
And they know the personality and what the plant is likely to do. And I'm going to give you a story to help you understand why that's necessary. There's a story that Michael Harner, the founder of the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, used to tell in his interviews that I saw him doing an interview on a recording of one of his interviews once. And I believe he was with the Jivaro people of the Amazon basin in South America. And he was undergoing an ayahuasca ceremony. It was one of his first initiatory practices into plant medicine. And he said he went up into the stars, into the upper world. And we can discuss the cosmology here in a second because it's going to become necessary. And he kept going up layer after layer of the heavens. And when he got to the limits of all creation, there was this starry heaven, and there were these two reptilian beings telling him, "Oh, you think God's here? No, this is our world. We run everything. This is our world." And then he was dropped back into his body. That was his journey, and nobody would tell him what it was about until he got scared, and he went to the missionaries that were in trying to convert the indigenous people to Christianity, and they opened the book of Revelations and pointed to a quote, and he goes, "Oh crap, it is there." But then he went to the shamans, and the shamans finally says, "Oh yeah, that's them. They're always telling everyone that. Don't believe them." And then he goes, why couldn't I talk to them more? And then he goes, because we have to bring you back. He said, bring me back. Why? You went in too deep. Ayahuasca was killing you. She
Mm.
was about to take your life in exchange for the knowledge she gave you. So we had to do ritual to save your life and bring you back.
Which just goes to show that this is not for a somebody just walking in off the street, and that it does have serious benefits, but also serious consequences if mistreated, if done without a trusted, vetted practitioner, etc. I would love to talk about what kind of training and credentials or what you should look for in a practitioner if you are seeking shamanic healing. And then I also want to get into specifically the healing aspect of shamanism. But let's start with what kind of training goes into being a shamanic practitioner.
Well, let's go with the fork in the road that creates. Okay, because then there's the shaman, then there's the shamanic practitioner slash
Mm,
shamanic healer, and there's a huge difference between the two. Okay, a shaman is created in a traditional calling, more than likely through shamanic illness. Okay, someone gets really, really sick, and no doctor can cure them. You know, they get so sick that they eventually have a vision of a spirit that the spirit tells them, I'm going to work with you from now on, or they say you're going to work for me. You know, and that connection to that spirit begins their beginning. And when the shaman of their tribe or their community finds out, they take him under their wing and they teach them. And they go not only through training with the indigenous shaman, but they go through initiatory experiences, rites of passage that culminate in them being allowed by their communities to function as a shaman. That is what an indigenous shaman is. If you do not meet all of those requirements, you're not a shaman.
Mm.
You have to be called, you have to be chosen, you have to be trained, you have to be initiated. That is why a lot of indigenous people say that only indigenous people can practice shamanism, because it's embedded into indigenous traditions that deeply. A shamanic practitioner or a shamanic healer is someone who has studied shamanic techniques through scholarly means, practical means, or any type, without having necessarily, they may have been called, but they may not. They have chosen, for whatever reason, to understand and embodied shamanic healing techniques, the shamanic journey, retrieving power, divination, soul retrieval, things along those lines, which we will talk about individually here in a bit. However, they don't have the training of with an indigenous shaman. They had not been chosen by the spirits. They had not been initiated the way an indigenous shaman has. Hence, in modern day contemporary shamanism, those of us who do not meet the requirements to call ourselves shamans, call ourselves shamanic practitioners, and we call ourselves, if we do healing work, shamanic healers. In shamanic practice, you have to have credible teachers. I myself study with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, which is an organization created by an anthropologist by the name of Michael Harner. He wrote the landmark book, The Way of the Shaman, which was one of the books responsible for bringing back the practice of shamanism to the Western world. He passed away a few years ago, may he rest in peace. But the foundation's still going, teaching core shamanism, which is the distillation of all of the indigenous knowledge of many scholars brought together into the core practices that are cross-cultural. Now, there are other organizations that teach shamanic practices to people without necessarily claiming the title shaman. And you have to know, where did this knowledge come from? Did you study with an indigenous shamans? Because there are cultures in today's world that are opening up their cultures to those who want to learn. Because the people being called and accepting the call are fewer and fewer. They're getting less and less. And some cultures,
Why do you think that is?
Well, a lot of young people in the modern world are obsessed with the idea of being trendy in a, pardon me for saying this, a Westerner white person kind of way. They see their traditional indigenous culture as outdated and obsolete.
So it's almost like lost through assimilation.
Precisely. When I was growing up in Mexico, a lot of the people of the local Huichol tribes, which is the native tribes of the area where I grew up, wouldn't even talk to people unless they were wearing the traditional ceremonial dress that they wore when they came down from the mountains to do business in the city. If you try to ask them questions about their culture, they would go, "Who are you? You're not one of us. You're dressed." And they pointed at someone in the city like one of them. Because that level of assimilation that we're living in right now is destroying indigenous cultures. That is why so many people say that shamanism should be a closed practice. However, there is that division between shamanism, which is defined by the shamanic journey, and the medicine work of those people.
Can we jump into more about what the shamanic journey is, and maybe we talk about some of the cosmology, maybe give some
Yeah.
some more in-depth information about that.
The shamanic journey is deeply connected to shamanic cosmology. It is a powerful way to begin the understanding of shamanism. In shamanism, we have three main worlds. Okay. If there are any Norse pagans here, they're going to be tickled to death by this because there is a huge reminder of shamanism within Nordic paganism. Okay. So if there are any Norse pagans listening, listen to this part, you will recognize it. The world is divided into the upper world, which is in shamanism, in modern day contemporary shamanism, I should say, not indigenous shamanism. It's where you find most of the benign, celestial, loving, caring, spiritual beings that will guide you. Saints, gods, goddesses, benign spirits, spirit guides, angels, the whole nine yards. If you want somebody that's very in line to help you, you go up. And there are many layers in the upper world. Each cosmology, each traditional indigenous cosmology, for example, has different amounts of layers. A good example of that is Aztec culture. There are 9 layers to the upper world, 13 layers to the lower world. Then there is the middle world. Okay, the middle world is where we are right now, but it is also separated into non-ordinary reality and ordinary reality happening simultaneously. Non-ordinary reality has no time and space. Ordinary reality does. It is also divided in some cultures, not all of them, into the 4 cardinal directions. Then you go down into the lower world, where you find most of your animal spirits, most of your ancestral spirits, and most spirits that are a little bit more dense in their nature. Both in the upper world and the lower world, you will find very little suffering. Very little, almost non-existent. In the middle world, however, you find spirits who are earthbound spirits, who are stuck here, who need to be psychopathed. You find amoral spirits that wish to do people harm or have their own agendas that are not necessarily benign. And you find all sorts of nature spirits that, even though they may be benign or otherwise constructive, do not belong making contact with human beings. I always tell my clients in those particular cases, when a nature spirit has lodged themselves in their energy field, I know you love ladybugs, they're beautiful, but that doesn't mean one belongs where your liver should be.
Right.
So that is the general cosmology of shamanism. All 3 of them, the middle world, the lower world, and the upper world, are united by the axis mundi, the world pillar, which in most cultures, here's the bit for my Norse pagans who are listening, is the world tree. Yggdrasil in Nordic shamanism and in Nordic religions, it is a prototypical example of the central pillar of the universe, to the point of having several layers, having Midgard, having the middle world, having Helheim, the lower world, and having the many branches above of the upper world.
Well, and we see that in many practices too. Some
in Hellenistic practice, for example, because I know a lot of Greek pagans as well, there is Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus could definitely be seen as part of the axis mundi, the central pillar of the world. A cave at the bottom of the mountain could be the entrance to the lower world. The shaman is the one that, either in connection to a plant that alters his consciousness, as a plant spirit medicine, either goes up, does the work, finds the helper spirit, brings back healing, wisdom, power, knowledge, anything that's necessary, and brings it back to the middle world and gives it to the people who need them, or goes down and does the same type of work. An interesting note to be found is that a lot of afterlife type of places that people ask me about, because I knew that one was coming, are found in the middle world. If you're Catholic, hell and purgatory are found in the middle world.
That's interesting. I would not have thought that.
Mostly not because down is not where suffering is, neither is up. Down, up and down, the upper world and the lower world are places of healing.
Hmm.
The middle world is where we find suffering.
Hmm. Well,
The
that
same,
makes sense because we have to go into the lower or up into the to get the healing to bring it back to the middle.
even places like, for example, uh, Erebos, the land of Hades in Greek mythology. If you talk to shamanic healers all over the world, no, they will tell you it's in the middle world because people
Hmm.
suffer there. If you go to the Elysian fields, for example, then you'll end up in the upper world or the lower world.
Well, and let's bridge this into specifically healing now and shamanic healing because that is our overall topic. So, let's talk about the symptoms that shamanic healing might be needed, right? And then we'll go into the treatment.
Okay.
So, what sort of things would you identify as this is a time to look into shamanic healing? And
Well, number one, okay, we need to identify which type of illness we're dealing
right.
with. The first aspect of shamanic healing, that are the two most common, that I would love to talk about, that we have time to talk about both, and then take questions, is number one, power loss. Number two, soul loss. Okay. Power loss. In Mexican culture, we have this entity called your tonali. That's an Aztec word. Toltecs call it your nawali. Same thing. It is an crucial part of your spiritual anatomy. It's part of your soul. It's an animal that was born with you in spiritual form, like a little guardian angel that is the living embodiment of all of your positive qualities. It is also your guide, spiritually speaking. It will guide you whatever you need and whenever you need. And it will protect you against all physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual harm. It is your protector. Native people of the Coast Salish tribes of the Pacific Northwest have a different name for that animal that most people will be familiar with, and that is the word totem.
Mm.
That comes here from the Seattle area, okay,
Mm.
Western Washington, the Puget Sound. When something really bad happens, really earth-shattering bad, that your power animal does his very, 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 very best to shield you from, to protect you from, making sure that you get through it, and it becomes wounded and it can no longer function as your power animal, it runs away into the upper or lower world to lick its wounds. That leaves you very vulnerable. If at any point in your life you have felt utterly powerless to stop something from happening that was absolutely horrible, and that feeling of powerlessness never left you, even you as a grown-up man or woman 10, 15, 20 years later still feel powerless, you need a power animal retrieval,
Mm.
because that leaves you very vulnerable. I have met a good example of this. Most of my clients nowadays are battered women. I see an immense amount of women who have not only are currently in abusive relationships that they're trying to get away from, but have a lengthy history of abuse. And it is always somewhere at the beginning of that chain that somebody mistreated them and they did not have the power to stop it. They had their power taken away from them because it can be stolen. And consequently, through decades and years, they could not regain that power because their power animal had left. And because of that, they could not stand up for themselves. They were literally powerless. and they repeated that cycle of abuse over and over again. Another example of that is illness. When you're constantly sick and your body is just not responding in a healthy immune way that it should, that is also part of it. And at the same time, there is also issues with money. Poverty is a soul level illness. It is a shamanic illness. It is a sign of illness. Because if you have a bad relationship with money, the very thing that is supposed to be nourishing you, there's a good sign that there is not only an emotional wound, there's a spiritual wound connected to that, and even a thought pattern connected to that. All of that combined could very well point out that at one point or another, that bad relationship to money was connected to trauma. So that is one of them.
Mm. So if you are feeling this, noticing this in your life, and you do your due diligence to find a shaman or shamanic practitioner, what can, or at least let's say they're going to you, because we can't speak for every shamanic practitioner.
Thank you for making that distinction.
Yeah, I'm realizing that we can't speak for everybody, but what can somebody expect coming to you? What things do they kind of need to be prepared for? What things might they
Well, the
expect?
first thing that I do, okay, is do a shamanic divination. Two of them. One of them, I do a bone casting. Osteomancy is one of the forms of shamanic divination that I've been taught. And what I do is I gather a series of animal bones that I have with me, and I pray over them. Then I cast them in a basket in a table in front of me between us. And I read the random patterns on how the bones fell in the relationship to each other. Each bone has many separate individual meanings that when they fall in specific ways, the meanings change. And this breaks apart the situation you come to me for. Because I had people who say, oh, yeah. I have this illness. I just need to get rid of this illness. And I cast the bones, and the bones tell me, yes, this began 20 years ago with that particular pattern. My issue then is not just the illness, but the individual pattern. Most shamanic practitioners don't operate that way. I do. Then I do what 99.99 of shamanic healers and shamanic practitioners do. Somebody comes to us and they tell us, I don't have this illness. We drum, we rattle, we exit our bodies. We find one of the compassionate helper spirits that do the work through us in the middle world from non-ordinary reality. And we ask them, my client has this issue. How do I fix it? We watch, we listen, we soak in all the information. Then we come back and we proceed on doing what the helper spirits have to do. The difference between my approach and the traditional approach among core shamanism practitioners is doing that initial bone divination. Because I really personally, individually, do love to break down the original pattern.
Right. That's really interesting. So, it is important that we talk about it, from your experience and your perspective. And it is interesting to see the various tools that a practitioner might use. We talked about you use bones and whatnot. Would you mind expanding upon what other tools either generally are used in shamanic journeying or healing, or even some things that you use? And
there is my set of bones that I use for divination. The main two tools of core shamanism, not indigenous shamanism, but core shamanism, are the drum and the rattle. The drum and the rattle are used to repetitively create music in a very repetitive beat that will induce an altered state of consciousness, a shamanic state of consciousness that will help navigate the upper or lower world, or even the middle world if necessary.
when somebody is in that altered state of consciousness, what kinds of things might they see or experience?
It depends on each particular client.
Hmm. That's well, yeah, it's like what does somebody dream? Well, it depends on the person. It depends on what their cosmology and their
And each
life
particular
experience is.
shaman or shamanic practitioner, particularly in core shamanism, will have their own territory within an
Mm,
ordinary reality. You know, we go three places, three layers up into the upper world. We will see different things.
mm,
That's our own metaphor that we need to understand what's there for us to draw upon. It is
mm,
our own individual place to bring healing from. And it changes for all of us because it is about our own individual connection to our helper spirits. The crossing point between the shaman and the shamanic practitioner, the shamanic healer, is that relationship to the helper spirits.
mm. Can you share about navigating around amoral spirits or spirits that might not be in your best interest or,
If you
need
are
to
ever, okay, this is the only thing I'm going to say, okay,
okay,
because it's a very dangerous topic
right.
and it can cross over into the line of dangerous knowledge.
Okay. Yeah,
If you are ever,
keep us in the right zone, but when do you
if,
go, I'm out,
yeah,
pause,
if
help?
you are ever in a trance, be it, let's say that you're doing a drum shamanic journey, that you dance, that you drank wine and you got tipsy and now you're flying in a dream, or you're in a lucid dream or astral traveling, whatever your path is in trance work, and you meet a spirit that appears to have the best intentions for you and wants to give you everything you ever wanted or needed in healing or more, or in other areas of your life. And if you pay really good attention, and if their face looks like they're wearing a mask,
Hmm,
ask them to take off the mask. If they refuse, run away.
hmm.
That is the easiest thing to do.
Well, and rounding back again, this is not something that somebody walking off the street, never having done this before, should just start messing around with, should just
Well,
start experimenting with.
that energy of, oh my God, I read a book the other day about shamanic journey, and now I'm a third degree shaman from the rainbow farts tradition of the unicorn,
I know that tradition. How interesting.
is
They
something
have a
that
great potluck.
you should definitely stay away from. You should
Yeah.
always ask your practitioner or your teachers, where did this knowledge come from? Did you
Mm.
study under an indigenous shamans? Did you study under contemporary shamans? And where did they get their knowledge?
Well,
And
we were just talking about amoral spirits. People can be just as amoral and can wear their own masks
precisely,
or their own
you know,
ego.
even the energy of that a lot of people in spiritual communities and magical communities nowadays are fond of the, I am learning directly from the spirit, or I learn directly from God and Goddess, and all of that energy, as valid as it may be that there are genuinely people out there learning from the spirits, it is a dangerous way to learn. That not only puts themselves in danger, their students in danger, and their clients in danger. Because throughout the millennia, shamans all over the world have laid out a path from teacher to student to safely navigate non ordinary reality and learn it in a way in which is safe not only for the student, for the teacher, and for the practitioner, and even the client. So, going on this journey on your own, unless you have your indigenous culture behind you,
Right.
saying there is this shaman 2 villages away who can clarify what you're going through, stay away from it. The idea of you can only learn from the spirits, yes, it used to happen a lot when indigenous cultures were around. People got sick, the spirits came and saved them. But in the end, even in those cultures, they were taken to a shaman to go teach them the rest. That is another thing when it comes to spirits. The idea of learning directly from the spirits is dangerous.
Yeah, because you
That is
definitely
something
need
that
that
triggers a lot
framework.
of people.
yeah, to refer to.
When I say
Well,
that
and
in my
yeah.
classes and in my interviews, it triggers a lot of people.
No, it's completely understandable, and it's something that, as, director of spa, I interview people all the time to join the Seattle Psychics Association, and I have to ask them the hard questions of, "Where do you know this knowledge from? Where is your training? Who is your teacher? What is this your culture?" Like, there's many ways that we are brought onto this path, but you can't just write down spirits taught me. And for me to feel 1,000% comfortable that you have enough framework of ethics and knowledge and vetted, etc., to be good to go and be a safe practitioner. And it's a tough one because it is valid to learn directly from the spirits, but when you are taking other people's spiritual health into your hands, it's very dangerous to just let that be the only thing on your spiritual resume. It does it happen? Absolutely. Is there incredibly talented, ethical practitioners and shamans out there that do just directly learn from the spirits and deity? Absolutely. But it is a very hard line to walk when you come into a public forum, because you need to have that foundation structure, and we all have a different path.
Well, going deeper into this, and a couple of other things I wanted to talk about is a different form of shamanic illness that is very prevalent in today's world, and that is soul loss.
Mm.
Soul loss in Mexico, we call it two things. We call it susto, which means fright, and espanto, which is the type of fright that you don't recover from. Susto is small. Espanto is people who are not, that are almost comatose.
Mm.
And what soul loss is when something so bad to you happens that a little bit of you kind of checks out into its happy place and doesn't come back. That's soul loss.
Mm.
It can be in the upper world, hiding somewhere, trying not to deal with its trauma, or in the lower world, trying to not to deal with its trauma, or in an even more destructive and painful way, stuck in the middle world, reliving its trauma over and over and over and over again. And
Mm.
when we get to that particular type of soul loss, that loop of trauma that repeats itself throughout all eternity, that's when we end up with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
As someone living with the diagnosis of PTSD, who has gone through several soul retrievals, trained on how to do soul retrievals, have done soul retrievals, including for people with PTSD, I have no problem making the statement as a professional shamanic healer that there is a direct connection between soul loss and post-traumatic stress disorder. That connection hasn't been fully explored, but I think it should.
I do see that those conversations are happening more and more, and I am finding, and we are finding in the world, more and more psychologists and therapists, etc., are looking at the spiritual side of healing along with the mental health side. And this is going to be my PSA. We as spa members do not replace mental health therapy. We do not claim to be mental health therapists. Anybody watching this and anybody, exploring their own healing, it is in your best favor and essential healing that you seek mental health therapy that is not in conflict with you, that you seek it freely and fully and are never afraid of it. You have to exhaust the mundane before you can exhaust the magical. Everybody deserves physical health care, mental health care, and spiritual health care. So there's my little side, piece there. But yes, as somebody who also has complex PTSD, trauma causes spiritual wounds, and those spiritual wounds will continue to manifest in spiritual illness and then in physical illness.
And a lot of the things that go along the lines of power loss also
Mm-hmm.
happen in soul loss. And something even deeper with that is the lack of ability to connect on an emotional level.
Mm.
A lot of people who do that, who cannot have good relationships, have soul loss. The one that gets to me that most people don't know, and when I tell them, it breaks their black little hearts into a million pieces, is empaths. Have you ever met an empath that it didn't matter how much they shielded, how much they grounded, how many crystals they carry, how many oils they put on, how many candles they burn? They walk to the mailbox to get their mail and they're overwhelmed by the emotions of the world? This is when I break it to them and they go, oh, damn it. They're not really empaths. That type of empathy that is uncontrollable despite all your efforts, it is a telltale sign of soul loss.
Right.
That hole in their energy field where those emotions are getting in with no filter that cannot be stopped is where pieces of both your power animal and your
Yeah.
soul pieces should be.
It's like
I've
the
known
ozone. There's holes in the ozone, and so too much radiation from the sun can get in. You're not able to shield.
same basic principle. A lot of people I treat for soul loss lose their abilities as empaths completely. And when that happens, new psychic abilities that were natural to their own healthy souls come to surface.
Hmm. We've talked about so when you have soul loss, you go through what's called soul retrieval, correct? And is that like a one session deal? Is that a multiple session? Does it vary?
It
And
depends on how many soul pieces there are, how much the person has fragmented.
mm,
Because sometimes a person in a soul retrieval sessions, they tend to be shamanic healing on its own, the session itself, and 99.9% of times it's very uneventful. A
mhm,
lot of people, unless you're incredibly sensitive to a power, to spiritual power, or you're very emotionally sensitive, um, you don't feel anything.
mm,
But it is the integration process. It is what happens after the soul retrieval, when all of those memories and all of those emotions and all of the things that were disassociated together with the soul pieces come back, that we have
mm,
to nurse ourselves back to health. Sometimes it's happy, sometimes it's a challenge, but because of that, in core shamanism, other traditions, other forms of shamanism do it otherwise. We only retrieve a certain amount of soul pieces. We don't retrieve that many at once because
right,
we don't want to overwhelm our clients.
right,
So because of that, if we have a person who shouted 18 times, it's going to take a few sessions to piece them back together and hoping that they don't do something harmful that will cause them to fragment again,
mm.
which would be another issue.
So high level, what are some do's and don'ts as somebody walking in to get shamanic healing?
Don't argue with your practitioner. When your practitioner tells you, this is what my helper spirit said that needs to be done today, you either say, I agree, or you walk out.
Mm.
Because it is not his place or her place to decide what they will do. It is the spirit's place to decide what they will do.
Which is
And
why it's important to vet who you're working with
and
so that you can have
beyond
that
that,
trust.
it is your decision to either accept that healing or reject it. Do not just sit there and go, oh, well, I want this, that, and that. Not what you told me. I came for what I wanted, not what you said. That is not going to bring you the healing that you need. Do not argue with the spirits that are helping your practitioner do the work.
Can we talk about fear and ego and how they can get in the way of healing?
Well, the thing with shamanic healing is that with the practitioner's endpoint of view, the point of view, is that we get out of the way. We merge with our spirits. They work literally through us. That is why we are the walkers between worlds. That's why we are the bridge between the human and the divine. The spirits come to the world of the middle world and work through us. What gets in the way is the mentality of our clients. If you come very invested on a very specific outcome or a very specific session, and you are determined to not accept anything less than what your mind is telling you you want, you're not going to get a really good result. If you are afraid to even begin the road of shamanic healing, to even jump in, don't. Because that's going to mean that when the soul pieces are being integrated, that fear is going to get in the way of you being nice to yourself enough to integrate, to baby yourself back to health. That is very dangerous. Jumping into a shamanic healing session filled with fear, it's very dangerous. The only time I have seen it be turned around in a good way is dealing with my clients who were battered women. That when we brought them back a power animal to empower them to break the cycle of abuse, they were like, yeah, they were empowered, they were strong, they were like, I can do this. Beyond the energy of powerless into powerful. If you're terrified of getting a soul retrieval, don't. Because you're not going to have what it takes to integrate the journey if all you focus is your fear. It's okay to be afraid, but what is necessary is stepping outside of the fear long enough to do the work. If you can't do that, you're probably going to fragment even further from the shock of the ritual.
Well, and we talk about how shamanism is like the oldest practice. It's the practice before practice. And now we're in a very modern age, and we've just gone through COVID where we all have been online and whatnot. How are you finding shamanic healing in a modern age where you're able to do it online? Are you able to do it in person?
Well, I do it long distance all the time, but that's besides the point. What I find out is that people think that this is an antiquated practice, that is a relic of the old ways and a foreign, mysterious way of an exotic culture. I mean, the term shaman is not even indigenous to the United States. It comes from the Tungus tribe of Siberia, and there are two main translations from Tungus into English. One of them is "he who knows," the other one is "he who sees in the dark." It is why I refuse to call myself a shaman, even when people call me that, because I'm not from that tribe. The thing with this is that we are living on an epidemic of shamanic illness. And I think this is the last thing I'm going to say before we take. I
was going to say, we were going to round up with what you really want people to take away from this.
I was taking a shamanic journey many, many years ago on behalf of a group of people, like a class that I was taking. And the idea was bring up a message from non-ordinary reality for everyone here. And when the microphone was passed down to me, I told them the story that I went into the lower world. And then from a tree branch came this nice green snake, and it just looked at me. And it goes, you need to tell your friends and the whole world that your society is living in a societal state of soul loss. You have broken apart from each other. You have broken apart from nature. You have broken apart from divinity. Look at your technology. Look at what you're creating. All of these cell phones are designed not to keep you apart, but to bring you back together. There is an epidemic of soul loss in this planet and power loss. If there is anything about shamanism in the modern world that I need to say, it says that it is far from antiquated. It is evolving. The energy of core shamanism with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies largely brought back this practice back to life from extinction. The work that the foundation does with indigenous shamans trying to preserve their culture has saved so many practices that would have otherwise been completely forgotten. And it also brought them to the Western world. The idea here is not necessarily that shamanism is dying or antiquated, it's just that it's deeply needed. If not anything else, for the millions of people not only going to trauma because of abuse of many types, chemical dependency, but also even for violence. How many war veterans are out there from many countries who have not fully left that battlefield, who went home leaving pieces of themselves in war? How many women are living with the memory of abuse that never leaves them? How many people are living with the memory of sexual assault that's still tearing them apart inside? The whole world is screaming with shamanic illness. And unfortunately, mental health care can only do so much. And even other spiritual healers can only take so much, can only take you so far. At one point or another, most people get to a point when they're going to need either a shaman a shamanic practitioner, or at the very least clergy that is trained in these types of healing to bring them back to health.
Thank you, Ramon. That is so true. Well, we talk about how trauma causes this soul loss or this power loss, and this world has suffered huge cultural, worldwide trauma and soul loss. That definitely pings home. Well, thank you so much for sharing about shamanic healing and how it can help us. This has been a fascinating conversation. We appreciate everybody's participation. You can learn more about Roman and book services with him through seattlepsychicsassociation.com. And we will post the link in the chat as well. And then join us at Hecate Sickle Festival, where SPA, Seattle Psychic Association, and Roman Delgado will be featured. And we will have a wonderful event together. It is hybrid. We're going to be in person in SeaTac, but it'll also be online. So wherever you're joining from, we'll be very happy to see you. And you can learn more about that at sickle.atcwicca.org, not .com. I can fix that, .org. Ramon, thank you so much for your time. This was fascinating and just absolutely enjoyable, as always, to do these deep dives into our conversations together. We hope that everybody has a fantastic day. Do you have anything you want to wrap up with?
If you ever want to work with me in person, I work out of a metaphysical shop in Tacoma, Washington called Mystic Sanctuary. If you want to book a time with me, a 1-hour session for shamanic healing is about $150 an hour. And you call the store at 253-302-3563, and you book an hour with Roman.
Thank you so much, Ramon. Thank you, everybody. Have a safe and beautiful night.